Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the end of Wu-Bruary the Sequel. I meant to drop this video last week, but I got sick, so my last two vids of the week kind of got pushed aside. Rachel and I didn't get the chance to make Rachel's Game Corner because I got sick as well. It was just, last week got rough. But regardless, today, last day of February, I wanted to make this video because while I don't mind the prospect of doing a three-peat for Wu-Bruary next year, I want to do this video if I decide to not do that next year, so that way I can at least talk about the subject that I've been dancing around all month. My favorite Wu-Tang solo albums. You know, I've talked a little bit about solo stuff here and there throughout this month and last year's Wu-Bruary, and I figured I'd actually just kind of get this opinion out there. These are the 11 albums that I think are the best Wu-Tang Clan solo and side projects. I went back and forth on whether I should include certain projects with Wu-Tang affiliated artists, and I decided to just go all out. There's a lot of stuff that some could say, well, that's not just a solo album, and I completely get that, so I put the caveat of side project in there as well. Obviously, while the group has had a plethora of success in various avenues as a group, solo-wise, they've also dropped some absolute classics. Some of my favorite hip-hop albums of all times are Wu-Tang solo albums. And I think that most of the artists of the group have found a way to either meld their own vibe more with their roots of being a part of the Wu-Tang Clan while also sprouting out into their own realms of collaboration and non-collaboration. And I think there's a lot of cool things that have come from the Wu-Tang Clan in a solo adjacent territory. So this was a fun video to pull together is what I'm saying, because I've been spitting a shit ton of Wu-Tang solo and side project, rekindling love with some records, realizing I don't like some as much as others, and, you know, reassessing some classics in my own ways. Leave the video a like if you're excited to see their rankings, and let's go ahead and get started.
He probably did. Was kids in and out of jail. He is snail. He was around on in the summertime.
I did a redacted on this album this year. I think that the overall world building that Ghostface does with a lot of the collaborators in the Potluck Theater unit just brings some great moments from Ghostface catalog that I think expand upon and further solidify in its own style ideas that it's been seen planted on records like Iron Man that almost ended up on this list but ended up just shy. It's a really good project that had a bevy of incredible jams throughout these sessions. Obviously, even though it got redacted, it's still one of my favorite solo albums from the group.
Love to dress a lab, hit rock, 100 bags, black do-rag, ski masks on G-Wags.
Obviously, you guys know Cuban Links 1's going to be on here, but Cuban Links 2 is also an incredible sequel album that not only just picks up from this record masterfully, it creates an atmosphere that showcases Raekwon's own growth in his own lane beautifully and marries the two masterfully. You know, kung fu movies and gangster films have had classic sequels, and this is the marriage of the two. Like I said during the streams of Shaolin Style, Raekwon is my favorite Wu-Tang member, and I think that he has just this well-harnessed delivery that I think he does a good job at writing story-driven tracks. You know, he's good at world building. Similarly to Ghostface Killah, the two of them just pair well together, and the collaborations on the sequel, like in here, are just incredible. I love that he finds ways to pay homage to other avenues of hip-hop that you know he enjoys, and similarly to Ghostface with Fishscale, just create this awesome experience in an album setting that I think Cuban Links 1 also does, obviously, but as a sequel, could have easily faltered in delivering that, as seen in instances in hip-hop.
I rock the mic and make the crowd say ho. People, if you ready to ride, then let's go. The older the wine, the more...
An album that I would consider the hidden gem within the Wu-Tang solo discography ephemera. No Said Date is an album that I did a classic review on in last year's Wu-Bruary, which I would highly suggest watching that video if you want a more in-depth discussion on this classic in my eyes. But I think that it reintroduces, and similarly to how Master Killa describes himself, enhances what the group has done in their past and where some of them had gone off in their solo ventures incredibly well. He is self-described as a core component of the group, and that is showcased while also having some moments where he gets to flex his pen game really well. And what I would say might have been the catalyst for an era in the 2000s of great Wu-Tang solo sequels and side projects, in my opinion.
Medusa steer, my guns bust the silence. I'm a black vigilante killer. Pro-balance is the rebirth, born again.
I talked about the album a little bit when I talked about the comic book that it's a companion to last year in Wu-Bruary, but 12 Reasons to Die takes the storytelling and world building from an album like Fish Scale and Supreme Clientele and harnesses it into this tight album where he and Adrian Young craft this Wu-adjacent story. It feels like it's in the spirit of his delivery and style with the group, but in the same solo intensity seen on those classics. And I really love the production style on this. I love the collaborations. I think Ghostface does a good job at telling stories throughout his verses throughout this and building the world of the war with the DeLucas and the records that are collected and the revenge plot. Like, it's well told in the album like it is in the comic, and it's just an incredible fucking album that I wish I had a physical copy of, because I would love to spin a physical copy of it while reading the comic book. A man can dream for someday, right?
It's all in together, going all out together. It don't take much to please me. Still, homes are never satisfied like the Stones.
While Method Man's done a lot of stuff with Raekwon throughout the Wu-Tang solo and group ephemera, I always picture him with Ghostface. And Method Man is a great artist on his own, as you'll hear me talk about later on in this list. But he does feel like an artist that, with the right rapper, could make some really good stuff. Cue the call to Redman to make Blackout. I've talked a little bit about his relationship with Redman throughout their acting career together, but they've made some pretty good stuff together. And I like the other Blackout, but Blackout 1 is so fucking good, man. I love the production style of this project. I think it suits both Method Man and Redman's raspy voices. I think their deliveries suit each other very well. I think they have very palpable chemistry, and they both come with bars on this project. There's some really good hooks, some really good features, and just an overall great project in Blackout. I think that it's one of the best albums to close out a decade like the 90s. I think that it's a really just fantastic release, in my opinion.
Check these non-visuals with tapes and a portrait. Flood the seminar trying to orbit this corporate industry.
I used to say this was my favorite Wu-Tang solo album. Liquid Swords is a classic still, like I said at the beginning of the month, one of the best hip-hop albums of the 90s, but so are the other albums I'm putting above it in this Wu-Tang solo albums list. I think that GZA is an incredible lyricist, and like, again, similarly to Ghostface, has dropped just a bevy of really good solo albums. This is just the only one ending up on this particular video list. I enjoy the production on here, though. Some of the best hip-hop beats ever are on this project. I think that the collaborations, by and large, just hit. I think that this is that prime first run of Wu-Tang solo albums within the mid-90s. It has some great wordplay, some great atmosphere building within the production, and as far as why I moved it down so far on the list, I think just the more that I evaluate the other albums that I've liked akin to this in the Wu-Tang solo discography, there's just either tracks or beats or just the overall artist's vision on the record that I think comes together a bit better or a bit more unified the more that I sit with those other projects. Liquid Swords is still incredible.
Wu-Tang Killer, beats on the swarm. Rain on your college ass disco dorm. For you to even touch me.
Like, there's a reason why out of everybody in the Wu-Tang group, ODB seemingly just cropped up in the most wild of places. He was a personality, and his music was a reflection of that. This album goes in a lot of different avenues. It's got some hook-driven stuff, but I wouldn't say that, like, that's the focus of the album. ODB is an unhinged artist, and this is a portrait of that. It just also happens to have some incredible production behind it, with some immaculate beats on here, and it enhances ODB's unhinged delivery that creates a portrait that you see artists kind of do more now in a very sort of forward-thinking way. You know, I enjoy this album a lot, and it was one that, like, while revisiting it, I grew an even deeper love for. Like, I like ODB's other album that he dropped, and it almost ended up on here. It ended up on a different list that I'll plug at the end of the video. But his debut ended up on this list because that production, while I like his sophomore album's Pharrell production, and I like a lot of the hands in the pot there to enhance his atmosphere, this is that golden age Wu-Tang production, man. The beats on here just go so much harder.
Somebody said it's on, if anything, I'll be set. The flow will go up.
Method Man was pushed hard in the group even on their debut. They knew Method Man was a star, and on Cal he shines brightly with great hooks on top of some really good bars, with production that, again, just works so well for him. I love Meth vs. Chef. It's one of the best Wu-Tang collaborative tracks that isn't on a Wu-Tang record proper. I talked about it during Mugazi, but Release Yo Delph is a classic. I love Bring the Pain and PLO style. There's just a lot of classic Method Man tracks on Cal that put it as one of the best Wu-Tang solo albums, track for track alone.
Snowy in the bezel is the cloud mergers. FBI trying one word with this kid who pooped out busted.
You know, I tried to convince myself that Iron Man was better than Supreme Clientele, but at the end of the day, I just don't think that that's true, because the beats on Supreme Clientele are incredible, and this is a great showcasing of why Ghostface Killah is one of the best rappers ever. He's got some incredible bars on this project. I think that he does a good job on here at building off of the marriage he was trying to make of his own style and those Wu-Tang roots into a lane that he would try to sprout from in other instances, like with Doomstarks, but just never quite hit the same stride as what was on Supreme Clientele. There's a reason why this album had a callback on Fish Scale. It's because Ghostface is just killing it on this project. And on top of that, I think that a lot of the collaborators are just trying to punch at the same weight he is and finding ways to succeed. I'm looking at you, RZA, on the grain, and you God, on the Bob Cherche Lagos. It's got more Iron Man, it's got more Wu-Tang, reached at a peak, it's incredible.
The brutal murder of my father, so my brain became stained with the horror. I'm having reoccurring nightmares.
Again, an album that I have done a classic breakdown on that you should check out if you want a more detailed discussion on this classic, but a horrorcore gem that has the RZA with Prince Paul coming together with Raekwon and Too Poetic to make an incredible series of really dark, sinister hip-hop cuts. It's got some incredible beats. It's got some really nice genre-solidifying ideas that I think come together harmoniously. Absolutely a necessary spin any October if you want some good, dark hip-hop with some really good grim energy. You know, while the RZA never quite reached that same energy or that same consistency in a solo outing all his own, I think that Gravediggaz really was something special.
Took 30 G's worth of jewels off that. So now I'm lamping in.
But if we're talking knowing your energy, knowing what you want to make music like, and finding a way to do it that doesn't quite lose base with your roots, Only Built for Cuban Links, an incredible fucking album. Not only does it see Raekwon just killing it, Ghostface gets to have this energy with him that just comes together beautifully, man. Again, the beats, impeccable on here. Ice Cream, Criminology, Knowledge God, Swords. Like, there's classics on classics on classics. One of my favorite hip-hop albums of all time. Cuban Links is essential New York 90s hip-hop, in my opinion. If you want to talk about growing from a group, Cuban Links is a blueprint for that, in my opinion. And those are my 11 favorite Wu-Tang solo album and side projects. Do you want to see my top 20? Well, I've got a list on Rate Your Music listed down below. thank you so very much for joining me this Wu-Bruary. I've got a fun March ahead. We're going to launch into spring, doing some spring cleaning, tapping more into those second chances I talked about in January, and trying to make a well-rounded time. Hopefully you're excited for it. If you like this video, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I usually drop 4 videos a week, and I stream a couple times a week as well. I have been Viral Rack. Thank you again so very much for watching. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.